right, I think we're set. We will try to get, we have about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, so we'll try to get to as many of these questions as we can. I apologize if we don't get to your question, but you can certainly feel free to maybe chase these two down afterwards and ask it if you still have that question. Okay, the programs for post-secondary education for students with ID/DD are lacking in Minnesota. This is a problem. How can we get more schools to offer programs, 2-year or 4-year, that are inclusive? I think this is for you, Jennifer. Will you just explain what ID and DD are? I don't know those terms.
So ID and DD is intellectual disability or developmental disability. So that question is a really good one. And I think part of what we're feeling, the good news is that the pressure behind higher ed and the need for higher ed means that we're including kids to a greater degree, and those families are pushing for more. And so, but it doesn't exist very much. And so I think going to your alma maters, donating even $25 and saying we really believe in inclusive education, that's a good start. I think that it's something where these kids are able to do so much with full access to academics that we need to push that conversation. I completely agree. We are lacking. There are 256 universities nationwide that have some form of higher ed that is inclusive for kids to live on campus and have a higher ed experience. 16 of them are 4-year inclusive programs for kids. Minnesota has a 2-year at Bethel. It's a good start, and we need more. So go and ask for it.
This one is for Jason. Jason, first, thank you. My son, who is trans, was in a school in MPS that didn't honor his pronouns and identity in kindergarten. We switched within MPS, and he made 2 years progress in 1st grade because he was seen and supported. He proudly filled out the gender change form. He was seen. Thank you. You make a difference. My question, he, in 3rd grade, is doing a lot of work educating peers, staff, and others at school. Do you have resources to educate folks on gender and conversational tools for, I don't want to talk about that again, can we play tag instead? He wants to be a 3rd grader.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just a brief story. So I grew up into this advocacy in the 90s and early 2000s, and I was talking to somebody. It was a couple years ago. There was an 8th grader who was like, "This should all just be like fixed by now, right? Like this is done." And I was like, "But think about like blazing a trail and like holding banners and stuff." And they're like, "But I just want to be a student." And I actually thought, like, what a revolutionary way to just love yourself enough to know that you already deserve this and that you don't need. Like this should have already happened, right? And so I think those conversational tools, I think we need to still do more work with our educators to be able to get our educators comfortable so that our educators can also share those tools back to those young folks or take that conversation for them, right? Even simple things, like there's stuff in the classrooms that we already have those signs, those kind of happy, semi-generic things, like be yourself, change the world, right? Like, what a great thing to just point to. So if somebody, like if you're, as a teacher, you overhear somebody saying, "Hey, are you a boy or a girl?" You know, you can just be like, "You know what, we're just gonna let them be themselves because maybe one day they're gonna change the world. Anyway, let's go play," right? So I think it comes to more teacher strategies, more sharings of books, and more we're also seeing younger peers have those conversations as well. So I think we're in a place where we're growing in that way, and it's just about continuing to have those conversations and getting more people comfortable with it so we don't just wait for the LGBT program coordinator to come in and have that conversation, right? Or the trans-identified child to have that conversation. But all of us as allies can step in and have that conversation. So I would say the simple answer is for us all to just get more comfortable and step up and start doing that for each other.
Another question, why do you think educators are not pro-inclusive education, special ed and gen ed?
Why do I get the hard ones that no one claps for? I am so jealous of the unicorns right now, I can't even tell you. Oh, could you read that again? Why are they not pro?
I think educators are not pro-inclusive education for special ed and gen ed.
I think honestly there's pre-service stuff that needs to go on where we understand that we are a team that's working on this, right? So my pre-service, thank you. My pre-service was over, under, around, or through, you figure this out. That's not everybody's pre-service. So I think that's a piece of it, is that we need to get comfortable that gen ed and special ed teachers need to learn this stuff together. I think that they need to understand that special education is not a place, but a service. And that not only are the kids better if we do this together, but the adults are better if we do this together. And so if the adults are separate, the kids are separate, and we need to figure that out in our schools. And we need to work together so that we can share, because there are some really killer special ed teachers that really know a lot of stuff that we're keeping in a parking lot somewhere. So I think that that's a resource that we just really need to, and I think people are scared. And it's just awareness.
They're so scared of how it will impact their scores, their numbers.
Right. And all it's going to do is open the practice up. I believe in my heart of hearts, and it's not just because I'm sitting here, but truly, like, if we put teachers together and let them think, we're going to figure it all out. So whether it's stuff that I'm talking about or Jason's talking about or whatever, we can figure it out. And so we need to give teachers that opportunity, and we need to push people to believe that that's what we expect to have teachers do together. And yeah, leadership, I think, is what it is.
Okay, this one, there are two questions that I think can be not mashed into one necessarily, but are related. Jason, this is the first one, can you speak to the intersectionality between disability and gender inclusion? And then the other question is, how does race intersect with disability inclusion? So maybe both of you can discuss that.
Yeah. I think just to cut to the first answer, and then I want to speak a little bit more about intersectionality in general, is I think disability and identity inside of LGBT context is an area I have to grow on and an area that I don't have that expertise on. And so reaching out to partners and really deepening our work in that way would be a beautiful thing to be able to do so that we're reaching all of our students. Broader on intersectionality, I've recently been revisiting Kimberly Crenshaw's definition of intersectionality and how that shows up. I myself kind of diluted intersectionality to mean multiple identities, right? But it's really about which identities are rendered invisible inside of a system and given that context, right? So when Kimberly Crenshaw talked about it, she talked about the idea that black men could speak for all black experience, white women could speak for all female experience. Inside that, what happens to black women, right? So that identity was rendered invisible. And so she further goes on to say that racism or anti-racist work without feminism upholds the patriarchy, and feminist work without anti-racism upholds white supremacy. And so we do need both those things working together, and so that we're able to actually make that change and that difference. With that, other identities that are rendered invisible, given the context, is that of ability. And I am very interested to learn more about that and need to go deeper in my own work on that as well. And so if there's stuff that you'd be able to add?
That was your question.
Sorry, that was actually my question. I'm just going to come right out and tell you that was me. So I would love to talk about it more. So, so let's go ahead. Let's talk. Yeah, I think that the intersectionality is, and I have an awesome picture that I want to share with you if I can get permission from the mom. But my son was a personal care assistant for a young man who has Down syndrome as an attribute, who just attended his first drag dance. And it's an awesome picture. And so the intersectionality there is just, it's something that we gotta figure that out too. So, yeah.
Here are two others that I think are somewhat related. The first one is, and I'm not sure if there's a specific person that these were addressed to, but maybe you both can answer. What can student teachers do? We get 12 weeks. That's one. And how can I still make positive change for students who I am only seeing 1 to 3 times during the school year? How do I implement support systems for students I don't know well?
And would you mind just reading that first question? It was student teachers?
Yeah, student teachers.
Yeah. So what I'm seeing right now in our student teachers is a really phenomenal opportunity, and it really comes down to representation is a big piece. So right now our student teachers, where Minneapolis Public Schools is starting to attract more and more transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary staff members, having that representation and that visibility does amazing things for our students. We know what it means for our students not to get to see themselves represented. And so to get to see that representation and just even being there can be an amazing thing. Now, I've also heard inside of our system that our transgender and gender nonconforming staff members are not always treated equitably or having the best time either. So what does that mean for representation, right? When you see yourself represented and then you don't see yourself being treated equitably, right? So that's another issue to unpack there. There was one other piece about student teachers that I want to say. I'm going to pop it over to you, and then I might recall what I was going to say.
So at the University of St. Thomas, the class that I teach is actually the master's level DD licensure methods class for teachers. And so I get to also do clinical practice for people who are working as student teachers. And I get it. It is a big job. You've got a lot to do. And if you have a professor like me, you got a lot more to do. I think, you know, the pieces with the students that I'm coaching, I think it's just being open to finding more information and knowing that when you're done after 12 weeks, you're not done. I think that it's finding that way to be the lifelong learner is a piece of it. You're not going to be expert at everything after 12 weeks. We shouldn't expect you to be. But can we pick one thing, you know, and really take honest feedback about that one thing that you want to be better at? And so some of the stuff I think that the student teachers that I'm with, there was one where I really went into the situation and I thought I was going to hate it because it was a level 4 building, meaning that those kids were self-contained all day long. There were 5 kids in this class and a teacher plus 4 paras, and just looking on the surface of it with my history of inclusive practices, I thought I am going to rip this student teacher a new one. It was the most respectfully done environment for kids that needed that. Like truly, when you talk about the continuum of services, it was really, really well done. It was in their native language. It was expecting the most out of these kids. And it had an exit strategy of how to get them back into their communities. And so the things that I valued, she had, and we had an open conversation. So I think if you're a student teacher going for 12 weeks, what's that part that you can find that you're not necessarily good at right now, and ask your mentor, how do I get better at that? So that's what I would do.
So earlier I kind of joked that this work can be also just kind of easy, right? And so one common theme between both of our presentations that I heard that I think a student teacher can really bring value to is to just see your students, right? And just let them know that you see them, you value them, you're glad they showed up today. If they give you a name and pronoun that's different than the one on the attendance sheet, use those names and pronouns. Just knowing that they're seen and valued is really what can make all the difference, whether you see them once a year, twice a year or for 12 weeks, right? You also have a unique strategy that you can employ that I like to call naive questions. When you just go, so I noticed we're doing this. Why are we doing this? Because you're new and you're a student teacher and you can get away with just continually asking questions, but you can be strategic about it to get other folks to think about different ways that their systems and different things that they've gotten kind of normalized or used to. Maybe they'll start asking those questions themselves too. So also use your position as a student to just keep asking questions.
I'm looking something up. Okay, let's dive into this one. I'm a queer special ed teacher, twice exceptional, smiley face, who leads the GSA at my middle school. It seems like some folks use kid gloves around me and then think I will meet many of the kids' needs on my own. When I push them, I'm guessing the teachers, to be more strengths-based perspective, many respond that they are judged and measured based on scores, parentheses deficits, that many of my kiddos have, and that and that impact their classrooms and their scores. That impacts their classrooms and their scores. How to respond, how to support them, et cetera, et cetera.
So what I'm hearing in that question is that you're being met by scores and assessments being kind of the ruler of all. Is that capturing that one? I think this gets at, too, where we were talking about like the roles of a special ed teacher or, you know, we need to come out of those places that are self-contained. We need to see ourselves as those leaders. We need to be able to go in and be an advocate. We need to see ourselves as consultant. That's how we get into these places. It's how we can then start to collaborate with teachers and open our practice to one another. So it's a process, and I think that systemically that special ed has been a separate place, and it's going to take time. It's going to take time for the adults not to be separate anymore so that the kids don't have to be separate anymore. But it's going back to those conversations and just really being able to insert yourself. I think it is part of why we have so much burnout. Because if teachers are believing that this is what it should look like for kids and they're meeting this resistance, it's really hard. And especially if you're a case manager who has paraprofessionals that you're also supervising. So you have to be the leader not only for your own work, but you have to be the leader and supervise the other adults, which you don't go to school to supervise adults. You go to school to teach kids. Right, and most of us have taught that what we're doing is special, that we need to be doing for these kids. We have to give up our turf. We have to be okay with that. We have to be comfortable with that. We need to just, I used to go in and sit, because the schools that I was teaching in, people would actually sit like in groups, like all the special ed teachers would sit together, and you know, and I would just insert myself and start a conversation. So it's things like that it doesn't have to be a big system-wide thing, but just keep showing up in those ways.
Okay, some big ones, big picture ones. Inclusion is a civil right. How can the Olmstead Plan allow for more inclusion in school, community, college, and work? The 2019 amendments show tiny increments of improvement. How can we speed up the desegregation? And then also, kind of related, what do you think needs to be changed in the federal law? For more supportive parents, re-education LRE. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. I don't know.
Take it.
Those are some words I don't think I've heard before.
Again, you get all the claps and the cheering. I get Olmstead and LRE. Such as it is. Thank you. So LRE is least restrictive environment, which I will tell you that my first slide, I was supposed to go into that, and I totally skipped over it, but now you know. But least restrictive environment, meaning that these kids are supposed to be in the least restrictive environment with their peers to the maximum extent appropriate, right? So my work, largely, I go into teams and look at their maximum and say, my maximum is bigger than yours. Because it generally is. Because it's left up to interpretation, right? And so that's part of the issue, is that if you're thinking in strength-based ways, if you're thinking, talking, writing, acting in these ways, eventually you're going to see that that maximum can be bigger. And so, you know, the law is there. It's been there for over 40 years, and that's what we're supposed to be doing. But the reality is that it's like a vision test, right? So that's the 2020 vision. And so how do we get to that 2020 vision? What prescription do teams need? You know your team best. Push people on it. Like, how do we get kids more involved in the least restrictive environment? Push, you know, Gage was not one that was intuitive to anybody to be. And now he's going into 10th grade, and he's doing stuff with everybody. And 2 years ago, he was sent home for a really nasty thing that happened to himself, that he did to himself, you know? So just remember, you can push your maximum. And I forget the other question. Oh, the Olmstead Plan. So the Olmstead Plan, for those of you who don't know, you should look it up, because I'm just going to do a really brief overview of it. But the Olmstead Plan charges us to think of the whole child, the whole person, the whole day, lifelong. What can we do? So this is like meaningful employment. It's meaningful places to live, relationships and belonging. It's person-centered planning. It's finding out what those family values and priorities are and making our IEPs match that. So we don't just pick things like how many minutes a kid can pay attention, 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Instead, it's how do we make sure that this person's valued life outcomes are a reality? And for those kids who can't tell us as much, what do their family and friends think? And that's basically the nutshell of it. And that's our charge. And that's also in law. So the more we can align to planning around a person and their family's valued life outcomes, the better off we're going to be.